Welcome to day 8. I know that some of us aren't able to be together synchronously, so I wanted an opportunity to create something that you could use to go through without just reading and experiencing what things were without a verbal explanation, especially since it's been such a long time since we've been together and we are shifting at this point between what we were doing with reflexive writing into extensive writing. I wanted to provide us a way to reorient ourselves to what we've been studying and doing, and also not just say, hey, we're going to be writing to publish, but to give you an entry point, a way to say, hey, don't worry about stressing about publication. Let me give you some ideas of what you could write about that can turn into something that would result in that kind of writing. What I'd like for you to do is begin thinking about your superpower. And as you think about your superpower, there's a couple of things that I want you to do. And then I want you to return to this video to participate in the rest of the lesson. There is a wonderful quiz by National Geographic on what is your superpower that will get your creative juices started. So that's the first thing I want you to do is take your superpower quiz and then tell me, either text me or send me an email about what your superpower is based on that quiz. The next thing that I would like for you to do is when we meet together live, I'm going to be reading from a book called What is My Superpower? And I would like for you to pause and listen to this book and begin to think about all the things that this book tells us about that topic and begin connecting with it. Be sure to put it in your archive so you have a record of our reading that you can return to and find the information later. So, happy quizzing and happy reading, and then come back to the video and we'll dive into the lesson that shifts us from that reflexive piece while still using those personal strengths as a springboard into that work that we want to do with the extensive writing. The strategy that I'm going to teach you today has really several variations depending on the way you look at it. I wanted to start with just a simple listing and then show you a couple of ways you can readdress it to show it in a different format for kids. The one we're going to do is called an expert list, but the effective way that I've done this before with students is I get a star sticky note and I give each one 3 of them. I also have tried giving them stop notes, like stop and take notes. And then sometimes when I don't have sticky notes, I just have them draw a hashtag on their paper, just randomly spacing them around. And so I'd like for you to go ahead and kind of think about how you want to do this work. And I'll give you a chance to follow along with me as I do mine. All right. As I've said before, this kind of pre writing leads to the type of writing that we're doing for extensive. But when we think about the genres and types of writing that we want our students to do, we're really leading them more into the kind of writing that we do for informational or a literary criticism or a response to literature, and even sometimes as those argumentative texts that we want them to write for research or other purposes. So here's how we go. The first thing that we do, and we just start creating a list. You think about all the superpowers that you have. So, one of the ones that I really like to think about a lot is food. And one of the things that I'm really exploring right now is sourdough bread and trying to figure out how to get those great big holes in the bread that make it so good. And then that, tender inside with the crunchy outside. I digress. Um, so, what I would like for you to do is on your sticky note or on your list, I would like for you to think about, as I have, about this first superpower. My first superpower is food. So then I begin thinking about all of the topics, all of the things that I know about food. So I just start jotting down all of the things that I know, things that I've read about. Um, and, maybe I could add another one right here. Um, I have been reading a book called Acid, Heat. Oh, I've got it my keyboard in a different way. Acid, heat and salt. I've been studying some of those things right there. I could even add the new thing that been thinking about is fermentation. And with the sourdough bread and the kombucha, the yogurt that I've been looking at. So I could add those things to there. If you would, go ahead and stop and think about 3 categories that you have. Just like I have, my first one is food, my next one is dumpster diving, my third one is reading, teaching reading and writing. So if you'll pause and think about whatever your first categories. Then I want you to think of 3 to 5 to 7, see how far you can stretch yourself, of the topics that you know about that type of superpower. So here's our next step. And this one really has been the most critical thing that has moved my students. When I started teaching them about how to write their essays, I would have basically the 2 reasons. And then everything after, they'd do the reason, and then they would just have a bunch of repetitive stuff inside of that part about that first reason or that first example. As I moved to this branching technique of continuing to add more and using different colors or different methods that you'll see in a minute with the branching on, it's kind of like a bubble map. I began to see more detail in their writing. So I'd like for you to try this too. Take a different color and think about one of those topics that you have. You've got, I've got here for tools, garlic press, pastry tools. There's all kinds of them in there that I can think about. Knife skills and types. Those are tools right here that and you can see that I took knife skills and I took it away because I felt like that was really more about tools. Um, Garnish tools. There are heat sources and types. You can see that under spices, I started writing the other ones down here that we could do, and I could put Italian. Been thinking about that some as I've been learning how to do pasta. I decided those are ethnic cuisines were topics that really belonged inside of spices and cuisines in that way. That's one of the things we want to have students start doing with their writing is they realize that they're figuring out how these topics are organized and subsumed in one another. And sometimes we look at the topics, for example, like techniques. I'm not really coming up with a lot of ideas with this point. So I can just get rid of that or not think about it right now. It's okay to have it blank for a little while. Maybe I can think about it more and some ideas will come later. At this point, what I want you to see is we've got this first layer right here. Then I have a second layer, and then I have a third layer. What we're seeing here is all of these ideas are creating a type of coherence that is valued by the rubric on our state assessment. It is creating what is considered to be depth, as opposed to if I have just these topics across here and that's all I'm talking about, I really have a very shallow paper that really doesn't get me the kind of score that I want to see for effective writing. So it's your turn. Stop the video and try to come up with 3 to 5 to 7 subtopics that would match your original topics and see if some of your other topics might have turned into some of the other things that you would like to discuss. Now it's time for another layer. What you can see here is that I have now a third color that I've added. I have the tools that I've talked about, but then I have the garlic press, which Alton Brown talks a lot about how the garlic press is really not a good tool for you to spend your money on because it basically has one use. And I've heard that it really crushes the oil a little bit too much for some foods. So then I thought about, well, what else do I want to say about garlic or the garlic press and how that's treated? Well, there are methods that you use other than the garlic press. You have the bash and smash method. You have the method where you sprinkle a little bit of salt on your board and then use the salt as kind of a grip to grab that. And then we've also got the things that are like mince and all of those and slice julienne that probably would go better in knife skills that are in there. So I'd like for you to go in here and think of the different things that you know about. For example, like pastry. I learned about lafsa from a person that came and stayed with me. It's a Norwegian kind of, it's kind of a mix between a pancake and a crepe. So there are all of these things that you had to learn how to use and manage as a form of tools to make the lafsa. It's your turn. Go in and try to add 3 to 5 and maybe push yourself to add 7 details about that topic. You're getting a lot of ideas for your writing. At this point, it is time for you to prioritize. You have to think about, really, what is it that I want to do? What's my purpose? What do I want to say about these things? What do I want to try to do with these elements that are here? And sometimes, too, you've got to think about who you're writing for. If you're writing for your teacher, you're going to write a different way than you would write for your peers. If you're going to write for a cooking magazine, it would be different than writing for, um, let's see, the reading teacher or English in Texas. Also, sometimes you have a prompt that the magazine or the publication wants a very specific thing. You still have these experiences, you still have this knowledge, you still have these details that you can add to it, but you may have to think about and shift what you're doing because of what they're needing and asking for. The other thing that I think is really important for teaching adolescents or just anybody really is that you got to think about how much time you have and how much time you want to devote to this particular project. Some things are worth more time, others are not. Sometimes you are given a time frame, and sometimes you just have a lot of other things going on. Another thing that I think is really interesting is to think about what mood you are in to write about. Sometimes I'm just not in the mood to write a particular thing. And sometimes the people I'm around or who I might be sharing it with, those aren't the kind of people that I want to share that topic with. So I'll save that for another time. What I would like for you to do now is prioritize. Which one of these things do you think that you want to write about? Today, I'm just going to put an asterisk next to spices because what I've decided that I want to write about is spices and about how having a basic knowledge of what those spices are, how they taste, how they impact food can really free you up in your ability to create all kinds of cuisines or create new combinations that are actually tasty. So you've got a couple of things to do. The first thing is I want you to prioritize because of these things right here. The second thing I want you to do is select one of those things that you would like to write about. Now that you've made your selection, as I have with spices right here, it's time for you to craft your working thesis. This is where a working thesis is not necessarily the thing that is going to end up being the thesis of your paper, but it's the way you kind of focus your eyes and your thinking toward your topic. Toward the end of your paper, what you do is you go back and you revisit it. You think, did I really write what I thought I did? And then you can tweak it and make it a little bit more sophisticated. But this is just a simple working thesis. It's a promise to yourself that you're going to write about this topic. And it's a promise to your reader whenever you get the real one down there that you're going to write about what you said you were going to do. And then here's mine right here. It's kind of, I've got a little bit of background and then I go into the thesis. Having a working knowledge of the flavor profiles for key cuisines frees the home chef to create a variety of meals without a recipe. Knowing the spices behind those cuisines is the starting point. And now I have a place where I can go into the different cuisines and the spices behind them that make them what they are. I'd like for you to go ahead and start that thinking as well. Craft your working thesis, get it down in concrete, in black and white, or in this case, white and black, on a piece of paper or on a digital document. Before we go into the next phase, I wanted to show you what this looks like with the stop and take note This is the one where I was doing dumpster diving, food, and then off of the screen is the information about reading and writing. What you can see is just another visual element. This is my first layer here and here. And then here are my first layers of topics here and here and here and here, right? And then my next layer of topics. So you can see how if you're really getting deep into your writing and you're really writing with depth and elaborating, this is kind of what it looks like. And what I can see here and what I want my kids to do is you can see that I think technique right here, I didn't have much branching there. So that would mean that I did not have enough information or details planned out to make a good enough paper. And this one right here, you can see that I still don't have enough. I need to go further and add. Most of the papers that I have looked at that are really well done, they have at least 3 and usually 4 layers of branching and detail that really make an effective paper that scores well. This should probably be part 2 of the video. You are welcome to skip it if you are needing to move on with your um, schedule for today and perhaps return to it later. But I really do feel like this is a key part of why we do this work. I went into the STAR essays, and this essay right here, I looked at what this student had done, and I looked at her thesis, and then these are her reasons right here. She had a little bit of branching right here, and this was her thesis. Working together, we can make a difference because we can work as a group and get support, have more ideas, and have more opinions. You see there's very little branching except for this one right here. And whenever we look at how this student scored on as the anchor papers that TEA released, this student scored a 2. There was very little of what we called that depth. We had the reasons that were across here that provided shallowness, that it was just not really a very in-depth exploration of the topic. Now, look at this next one. You can see that this student also wrote a lot smaller. We can see too that there was tons of branching in here. Lot of different ways that this student was doing the work. We had a hook, we had a thesis, she had a comparison and contrast paragraph that was in here, or maybe it was a young man, I'm not sure. The branching that is in here is complex and multifaceted, and especially in these elements right here with India and with the US, these elements had many layers of explanation that they were trying to explain in how those components really compared to working together makes a difference. This student, whenever you look at how they scored on the anchor papers, I'm sure you already know the answer. They scored a 4. So now it's your turn. I'd like for you to go ahead and explore your ideas. And always, as we are working in this institute, we're working with 2 layers. The first layer that you're thinking about is you're thinking about what am I going to do in this institute? How is this activity going to lead me to think of ideas that I could possibly write about? And you begin a draft. That's what you'll use as a stimulus for the beginning of your writing time today. But the second side that we always think about as we're working in the institute is what am I going to do when I'm in front of students? Which method will resonate best with my students whenever they begin to write and explore how they can really extend and develop their ideas, how they can really explore what they personally know that can become these assets for the topics that we write about for extensive writing.